Difficult. Women. Hello.
Hey.
How's it going?
How's everyone doing?
Oh my God.
Wow. Well, I'm Katy.
I think I'm still Marie,
You're
although
still Marie.
it could change, you know? They could
Morph
just
into
strip all women's names and all rights, all of our own choices, and just
of Adam.
yeah,
Adam.
You're just of Adam. Anyway, yes, I am Marie, and you are listening to the Difficult Women podcast. Welcome.
Well, it's been a crazy. It's a Saturday right now that we're recording. It's been a crazy 24 hours.
Yes. I mean, unless you're living under a rock, you know that we lost an incredibly historic woman last night. RBG.
I'm always the optimist, right? Because she was old. We kind of knew this could happen. So I wasn't super shocked. And my hope is that this will start mobilizing some people that were feeling less mobilized.
Yes, I completely agree.
I'm feeling hopeful.
And actually, there's proof in that. Just last night, $10 million was donated to, through Vote Save America, I think it's through Vote Save America. They're doing a fundraising campaign. Basically, it's called like Ditch Mitch. And they raised $10 million, and it splits the amount of money that they're raising to 13 different Senate races across the country. So I'm really inspired by that. And they kept like posting like raised 3 million. We've raised, 7 million and then 10 million. So, I mean, the money really matters when it comes to these grassroots campaigns too.
Very much so. And I heard that Trump's kind of running out of money, so we'll see.
I know he really is.
We were just talking, I think last week it was, about how we see like Trump's ads everywhere and not enough of Biden's. And now I'm realizing like, oh, maybe it's just because they were like going so hard on those ads. But now they're like maybe going to start running out of money if they're not careful. So we'll see. I mean, they shouldn't be careful. And Biden maybe is playing the long game in a way that will be good. And then in terms of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think also the other thing I'm kind of hopeful for is that it's really picking up the conversation that I've been trying to have with some people that really don't like Biden, don't want to vote for him, and just would prefer not to vote at all. But it really hits home that conversation that we have about when you elect a president, you're not just electing a president. Mm-hmm. You're electing the people around him and the things that president or her one day, mm-hmm. And the things that person can like do when they're in that position. When one of those things is push Supreme Court nominations through. So I do really hope that if you're out there still kind of thinking like, I hate Biden, I don't want to vote, maybe this will just remind you like why it's important that we vote, even if and you know why a third party vote this year just is not ideal. I get it.
No,
but it's really not ideal.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm sure by the time this comes out, there'll be lots of conversations around Miss Ginsburg. But I just, thought we'd mention it since it's on brand for us.
Yeah, it certainly is. Just so sad. She was just,
I'm just sad
number one difficult woman.
Right. Well, I'm sad she didn't get a chance to ever like retire. She had
right.
We worked that woman into the ground. Literally.
Well, I'm sad that we can't celebrate her life right now. I feel like we have to instead mobilize for action instead of like taking a minute, understanding what an incredible human being she was. But instead we have to like the initial shock and sadness of the fear that what this means.
Yeah, I do think that like that mobilization though is a celebration in its own way.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that
yeah,
I think that if you not you, but if one wants to celebrate her, then they will mobilize. Actually, can I read a really quick thing? AOC jumped on this in a really great way and was just like, look, I know it's scary, but there's things we can do. And there was like a list of some things. One that we could do like today, right? One is make sure that check your voter registration, get out there. And another one is to actually vote. Another thing you can do is organize and show up to support local organizers. And then a couple of other things that I thought were interesting was you can write down 5 people you can talk to about their vote. And there are some people, that only you can really have a conversation with, and that you might be the one that can help change their minds. Artists can rise up, and your art can connect to people's emotions and propel action. And that's one thing that we do very much, and feel strongly about. If you're bilingual and you have if you're bilingual, then you have another group of people that you can reach out to that not everybody can. Don't give in to the cynicism. And be ready to fight, be ready for, this is not a time to stick your head in the sand.
Right. And you can also call Mitch McConnell's phone number. It is 270-781-1673. And just quote him by saying the American people should have a voice in the selection of their next Supreme Court justice. Therefore, this vacancy should not be filled until we have a new president. So just quote him exactly. Just keep calling. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do. And I feel like activism is the thing to make her legacy live. Obviously, she's passing the torch to us, and it's up to us now.
Yeah, and I'd have to say, like, this activism in politics does excite me, because while our political system was not always set up as equal and perfect as we would like it to have been, being active in it is the thing that makes it more equal. It's the thing that makes it work, because the system itself, if done properly, it can work for us, but we just have to really use it. And the reason why the fascists have been taking over is because we haven't been participating. That's the only reason. That's the only reason.
Right.
So it's our fault. I'm gonna get
also,
out there.
I mean, I did watch The Social Dilemma. Have you watched that documentary yet on Netflix? Oh my goodness. The big thing I took away from it is just how much these tech companies can create culture wars.
Oh, sure.
With enough money, you can do this legally as well. And that's exactly what the Russians did to hack. They didn't even hack our election in this sense, of that they were able to infiltrate Facebook with all this fake news, but they were doing it legally. That's how Facebook had it set it up. And it's just going to continue if we don't.
Well,
stop
that actually
shit.
leads us really, really perfectly into our topic. But before we get into our topic today, don't worry about fucking those dildos. You can fuck these dildos instead. Does that make sense? Free stuff is awesome, but free stuff to spice up your bedroom is even better.
Select almost any one item for 50% off, and then Adam and Eve loads on the free stuff.
Enter offer code HORIO at checkout and get 10 tantalizing free gifts.
A sexy item for him, a special gift for her, and a third item you'll both enjoy.
And 6 free spicy movies.
Ooh! Plus, free shipping.
That's HORIO, WHOREO, HORIO at adamandeve.com. So as you were saying, that, we're in a time right now where the social networks can really mess with, and people with money can mess with these culture wars where people but what it basically comes down to is getting information that's truthy, but not full truth. And that is related to what we're talking today, because we are talking about the United Daughters of the Confederacy and their impact on all of our collective understanding of how we've interpreted the Civil War, especially people from the South.
Right. Yeah. If you don't know what the Daughters of the Confederacy, how that began, just a quick little history lesson of it. The Daughters of the Confederacy began, it was founded in 1894 in my hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. Oh, God. But yeah, it was a group of women. They were all family members of Confederate soldiers. So they were either daughters or granddaughters of veterans of the war, of the Confederacy. And so through social engagements and fancy fundraisers and stuff, they raised a ton of money to, they had 2 main goals, and that was to construct Confederate monuments. And then also, this is what I found crazy, but also to solidify the place of women as cultural and historical gatekeepers of the Old South.
Well, and it's worth mentioning that, like, why did this start happening when it did? And the reason why it started in 1894 was because that was a really like 3 decades after the Civil War ended. The Civil War was from 1861 to 1864. And so by that time, a lot of the older veterans that had gone through the war were dying off. So there's a new generation of young people that hadn't experienced the war. And so their impetus was to kind of like pass on the message of the Confederacy, which was certainly garbled at best in terms of what actually happened versus what they would like us to believe happened. But so they were very active in trying to get these, like, for example, the monuments up. And by 1914, that was sort of like the height of the Daughters of the Confederacy. And they got a lot of Confederate monuments up in very prominent places. And again, the idea there is it's like kind of like a quiet brainwashing, because you're just inundated with these quote unquote Confederate heroes who, and the idea is to preserve their legacy or what have you. And in addition to the monuments, so of course that seeps in on us, right? All of us living around them, and they're everywhere. But also they were very, very, very active in getting children to learn about the Confederacy. So they also manipulated the textbooks, especially in the South. But I think that even those messages leaked into other textbooks all across the country. And they were very, and again, these women were very prominent, sort of elite antebellum families who they had a lot of money to pump into this kind of thing. So they had a lot of sway with the governments of each state and of the federal government. And they were able to actually make like a regulation book that said, like, you can't talk about this. If you're going to talk about slavery, you have to talk about it like this. If you frame Confederate soldiers, they have to be framed in this particular way. And any book that kind of like actually told the truth about what was happening in the war, you had to like label, you deface really from the front with saying that it was like not fair to Confederate people, or not like a fair telling of the story. And they got all this through. And so that's how you ended up with these textbooks where they'd say things like, oh, the slave owners would bring in their slaves and they would have a party together and they would all enjoy. And then the slaves would dance out into the fields and happily sing as they worked, and they loved their lives.
They changed the language, I believe, from slave to servant to make it seem as though that they were hired help, but really they were just enslaved people from Africa. But yeah, so the leading organization that they founded was known as the Lost Cause. So it's the lost cause of the Confederacy. And so what they implemented in these textbooks were 3 key points that you were just saying, but I'll just reiterate.
Yeah, please.
The Confederate fight was heroic. And they talk a lot about like the war of the Northern aggression. That's what they call it. Instead of the Civil War, they would say like the war of Northern aggression, because they really like to target in on how it was just how the South just wanted to be independent. That's all.
Right. And then state rights is how they
and states' rights. Yes. Then we said the enslaved people were happy. They were happy people. They talked a lot about that. And then slavery, this is the big thing. And still today, this is a really big thing that I'm going to have a call.
Argue about, yeah.
Still people argue about, which is just insane. But slavery was not the root cause of the Civil War.
Right. And they still today, people will argue that the root cause of the Civil War was fighting for state rights. Mm-hmm. And that is not a full picture of what was actually going on. Right. It's interesting about the textbooks. I just sort of want to talk about that for 1 second, because like I grew up in like a union state, right? Like a one that fought in the union, and we were pretty liberal in the DC area. But I remember being in like 4th grade, and we were reading through a textbook, and there was a moment in the textbook where they said it was like, it wasn't as clearly insane as like, and the slaves were happy. But there was like I remember there was like a passage in there that had something to do with like, some slave owners weren't so bad though. Like they were more kind to their slaves. Like there was a thing about that. And I remember like being like, oh, that's nice. That's good. Oh, good. And like, as a little white girl, I was like, oh, see, okay, good. That's good to know. And maybe slavery wasn't so bad. And then our teacher was like, so see that line there? She's like, that's bullshit. She didn't say bullshit because we were in 4th grade. But then we had to have this like conversation about how that's not really accurate. But I remember as a 4th grader feeling conflicted even about that, because I was like, but it's in the book. And the book is history. Like, I didn't have a concept of who wrote. I didn't think someone wrote the book. It just felt like this is the truth. And then she's saying it's wrong. And I think that's where kids are so easily indoctrinated with this information or misinformation, right? Because if it's like written down, you kind of feel like, and it's like in your school, you kind of feel like, isn't this true though? You know? Mm-hmm. Which is one of the problems that we're having with like the internet, which is that people see like an article and then they're like, oh, it's written down. Like, I'm going to pass this along and I'm going to believe it, whether it's true without, further research. And it's really hard, I think, to digest that like your ancestors and my ancestors and these ancestors out there, one's ancestors were participating in something so horrific. So it's just like much easier to believe that it was wonderful, and that during the Civil War, the Southern Confederate Army was fighting for their own rights and what they believed to be right too, and that we have to like uphold those memories of those soldiers. But I want to make it really clear that the Daughters of the Confederacy, it's still a group. They still. I went to their website.
20,000 members today.
They're certainly less influential than they were in 1914, but they exist and they still think that they're doing the right thing in one way or another. And they do, they give money to people for schooling, and they donate things, and they have this sort of benevolent thing that they do as an organization. But at the end of the day, what they are really still promoting is this the memory of the honorable Confederate soldiers and the fight of the Confederacy, so much so that they've been labeled a neo-Confederate group, which is known as like a hate group and like a step away from white supremacist group. So they're like watchdog groups that have their eyes on them. So if you're participating, and there's all these like old white ladies, that are like are participating in this. So if you're some old white lady out there that's like, oh, I'm a daughter of the Confederacy and I'm not pro-slavery, I'm not pro-white supremacy, I would venture to say then you don't understand your organization very well, because they're historically very not even just like ambivalent about slavery. They're like pro-slavery people that were pushing for these monuments. In addition to that, the Daughters of the Confederacy were very, very, very vocally in support of the KKK. Like, not even just like, we support them. They were like, this is great. Like, we're into this. We want this. So it is like clearly a dangerous group. And what they do is spread propaganda.
Right.
So it's like, you think like, what's the big deal about like a statue? But it's like, it sinks into you. It's just another piece of propaganda.
Well, the thing about Nashville is that, and I've talked about this before, but it enrages me that there is Forrester, what's his name? Nathan Bedford Forrest. He was a KKK head wizard. Is that what they call him? Grand wizard.
Dragon wizard or something.
Yeah. But his bust is in the Nashville Capitol. And then, and that's still today. And then they're trying to replace it with Dolly Parton. It's been this whole big thing, but it's still there. And what I also learned is that, so there is a statue on I-65 in Nashville, and I've talked about this before too, but it's private property and it's of him, and he's like on a horse and he's in his Confederate soldier uniform with a knife and whatever. And before that statue, when I was a kid, there was like, it was just covered in Confederate flags, and because it's private property, nobody could really do anything about it, I guess. But it's been vandalized over and over again. Since then, like the flags have come down. So there is just this like statue, and it's just disgusting. And when you're driving to Nashville, you pass it every time that you're on 65. But what I just learned is that they were actually trying, one thing that they can do, they were trying to pass is that donated plants, people were donating money to donate plants and trees to just grow, cover it up. Guess what? The Republicans voted it down.
Of course they did.
So still, this year, they voted that down.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, but that's white supremacy. That's their agenda then. That's that's just truly what it is. So,
well,
I don't know. It makes me really sick.
No, it's awful. And here we are, we're talking about these things. And then you might be listening. I mean, you might be listening going, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Or you might be listening going, well, but that was a long time ago. And even the group now is not as active as it was. And why does any of this really matter? Like, why? What does it have to do with like right now? So I was asking myself the same question, like, why is this important? You know? And it led me to sort of question like, well, what was going on in the Civil War? Because like I don't remember all the details. It's like hard. And when I think about, well, what was the Civil War fought over? I think like slavery. But then I'm like, well, what is it about the state rights? Like, was there something about state rights? And in fact, I was like just looking for random stuff on this, and I found an interview with a Confederate soldier who was like 16 when he was fighting in the war, and this was recorded in 1944. And in the interview, he's even saying like slavery was terrible. Like we were not fighting to protect slavery. We were fighting for state rights. So I'm like, like that's so interesting that even this guy that was fighting in it is like talking about these state rights. So I was like, well, what's that about? Like, what is that? Is there truth in that? Or what is the deal with that? And I found this really amazing interview on, it was on WBUR.org, and the show is called Here and Now. And they interviewed this university professor. He's a historian and a Yale professor. His name's David Blight. And this interview came out in like 2017 or something. And the name of the interview, if you're looking for it, I really recommend listening to it because he really breaks down what started the Civil War in a way that was very understandable. And the name of the interview is called Romanticized View of Civil War Means Nobody's Really Responsible, historian says. So if you think about that, like, so if you romanticize the Civil War, then you can kind of like separate yourself from responsibility. So just to walk through what some of his points were, because I was like, what was this about? He was saying, I guess like it came back up in the news around 2017 or something because the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, was praising Confederate General Robert E. Lee and saying that he was an honorable man. And the reason why we were pushed into the Civil War was because of a lack of compromise with the North. Like the North was unwilling to compromise with state rights in the South. So you're like, okay, well, he got a lot of pushback from historians because historians basically said, that's wrong. Historically, the way that this thing started was there was slavery in the South, and it was like the thing that was making these people billions of dollars. So think of like an Amazon situation, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody's making a lot of money off of like slave labor, right? And that's their economy, and they like it like that, and they don't want to change it. But people were not totally blinded by the fact, other people weren't blinded by the fact that slavery was probably not cool to do. So there's a lot of people for a long time going, slavery's really fucked up and we have to like stop it. But these southern states, they had so much, they were like making a lot of money, and that was how these rich Trump type people just didn't want to lose any of their money. So they pushed back against this idea of getting rid of slavery. So then when there was some, and you have to like listen to the thing to get it perfectly accurate, but there was things like negotiations. And so the presidents were negotiating with these like Southern business people and like the Northern abolitionist types of people and saying like, okay, fine. If we have slavery then in the South, in your state, right? Like in Tennessee, we're going to have slavery in that state. But then we're going to make Maine a state in the North. And then that's going to be a free state. So we can balance out states that are free and states that are not free. And they even end up just drawing a line then, that like sort of Mason-Dixon line, and said, anything below here, you can have your slavery, but anything above has to be free. We're only going to allow that to be a non-slavery area. And so they were like allowing slavery to continue. And this is one of the things people like complain about with Abraham Lincoln, because he was also sort of like, fine, like have your slaves, but like we have to limit, eventually we want to get rid of slavery as a system. And people are upset that he wasn't just like never slavery, but it was just the negotiation of the time. And that was it was never enough for the southern states, because then they started saying like, well, now you're infringing on our rights to make money and make a profit, because we can't be doing our businesses up through the north, and we can't move our industry up to the north because now you're saying I can't have slaves up there. So every time they would try to negotiate and compromise, it was the southern states that were like, it's not enough. It's not enough. Even though what we're compromising is human life, So eventually Lincoln was just like, no, this is like enough. Like we have to stop this like now. And then they started like the Civil War because they just weren't willing to give in. So is it state rights? I mean, technically, but what they were fighting for their rights to own slaves.
Right.
So I'm explaining that to people because like, I think there may still be people out there, maybe they're listening, who are still like, but it's our Southern heritage. It's our Southern heritage. It's like, no, your heritage is just trying to fight for the right to own people. That's the heritage. That's what they were fighting for. And it's crazy too, because like the kids that go out and fight in these wars, and it's still true today, they're not the people that make the money from the deal. It was a financial situation where the rich people wanted to continue to be as rich as possible. And then they framed it in a way, and it did really destroy like their
economy, Southern economy,
because they like had relied so heavily on free labor. But that's their own fault. It's like, you should maybe, and I think that was part of the idea, was that they were trying to ease in this idea, like, okay, we'll ease in paid labor so we don't just destroy these companies right off the bat. Nobody really wanted that. But they were unwilling to compromise. They didn't want it to be that way. So the point is, when we romanticize slavery and the war and say, well, both sides were fighting for what they thought was true, what then we're doing is totally eliminating the horrors that really were involved in what slavery was. And in addition to that, post-war, we're like diminishing, we're not taking responsibility. We're not looking at really the responsibility and where it lies in terms of where slavery was coming from and how bad it was. But then even post-war, we're sort of like, oh, it's over. They're free. It's fine. And that makes us unable, if we're not looking at this in a real way, to deal with the repercussions of slavery. So it matters now, because so many of these arguments and conversations we're having about things like Black Lives Matter and, these people that say, oh, everybody's actually equal and you should just pick yourselves up by your bootstraps, and, Black people are lazy and Black people are violent and Black people, those kinds of arguments, they all stem from this romanticizing of slavery and not taking any responsibility and saying, wow, we fucked up. Nobody wants to say, oh, we fucked up.
Right. Well, who has done a really good job at saying, oops, we fucked up, is Germany. When it comes to the Holocaust, I don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, they have their neo-Nazis and stuff.
They have their neo-Nazis.
At one point, they did do a good job.
Yeah. And so I think that that's the biggest thing about America, that there has never been reparations about this. There's never been, the only monument for actual Black people in the United States was just created last year, I believe, in Memphis, or it's a lynching. It's actually a monument that's been erected for, like, to tell the history of the true history of lynching, which is absolutely that is a part of American history. And they have, I need to look this up real quick. Actually, it's in Montgomery, Alabama. I was completely wrong. Yeah, it's the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. That's what it's actually called. And there's the Legacy Museum there on the property. And it's honestly, I think it's the only thing that acknowledges this like bloodstain of our past. Because and I think that a lot of the conversations that I've had through several years of living in the South about these monuments, and especially we're having these conversations right now of like, how these monuments are being torn down. Should they be torn down? Are they a part of history? Should they remain? I mean, if you understand the reason why they were monumented in the first place, it's because the Daughters of the Confederacy. They did it because they were whitewashing history. And then they were erected during a lot of like the 60s and the 50s and the 60s. Whenever Black people were able to get ahead in history, hundreds more monuments went up. And it was like a silent, just check your, like, I don't know. It was like,
no, it's like a fear tactic for sure.
Yes, and
it's like a check yourself kind of thing. It's a, you know, we want to remind you that we are still, that is white supremacy.
Yes,
we are supreme we're still over
here.
You, and we're going to like keep our thumb on you.
Right.
You know, and that's, I think any trying to justify that is misguided.
Mm-hmm.
And it ties back into this romanticism that, but, you know, no, none of that. It's all fake. All that is fake.
Right. Well, I mean, I hear, and I've had conversations with friends who say, like, it's just a shame because some of these monuments are hundreds of years old, and it's just a shame that they're being torn down because they are history, and we should preserve them as that. And I'm like, yeah, take them fucking down and put them, if you want to, in a museum so we can learn from this. But like, I just can't imagine, and this is talking about like an experience that I do not know what it feels like, but as a white person walking by a Robert E. Lee statue, I'm going to have a different experience than a Black person walking by a Robert E. Lee statue or something. You know, I mean, it's just like, it's just unacceptable, I think. And put up monuments that of people that actually have done incredible things for our country.
For sure. I think also what's fascinating about this too is this Daughter of the Confederacy tactic of putting up the monuments while simultaneously indoctrinating the children was brilliant. Yeah. It's brilliant. Because, and they have a Children of the Confederacy group that was like an after school group, and that still exists. That still exists. So it's this thing that like, when people say things like, oh, it's just such a shame, but they did fight for what they believed in, or like any kind of excuse like that, that is from the indoctrination. Mm. We have been brainwashed. Mm-hmm. And it is a testimony to how manipulative that was, because we're still having this conversation, you know, today.
You know who's the most famous Daughter of the Confederacy?
Who?
Blanche from the Golden Girls.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she
wasn't there an episode about that though?
There was there was, I guess it wasn't, it was, so after the Golden Girls ended, I heard this on a podcast, so I have never seen this episode, but I did see parts of it floating around recently. But so the Golden Girls ended, and then they started the Golden Palace, where like the girls like started a motel in Miami or something. So it was like a separate television show because what's her name wanted to leave. B. Arthur left. And so then the writers were like, oh, well, we can't have just the Golden Girls, so let's do like the Golden Palace or something. So anyway, during this one particular episode, Blanche, they're in this like hotel that they're owning and running, and that she puts up a Confederate flag in the lobby.
Right.
And Don Cheadle works at the hotel, and like they have, I guess, a full on episode, and I've seen clips of it floating around, which, you know, if you're interested in, Google it. But it's like a learning for Blanche of, you know, of the unlearning for Blanche that's on in an 80s television show.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen that episode, and I remember that scene. I think I just rewatched that scene also because it was floating around. But like, there's this, she's doing all the same defense of the Confederacy and of it's her heritage. It's my heritage. It's my heritage. And again, with these, like the Children of the Confederacy, like we never lived through the Civil War, right? So we didn't have that experience. So it's not, so heritage, okay, fine. But with like the kids and stuff, you teach them the songs, and then you feel, and there's food attached to it, and it feels like a culture, and it feels like a thing. And I think as like humans, we are so hardwired to want to belong to something, right?
Mm.
And even in the United I've always felt weird because I'm from DC and it's sort of a transitory town, and like I never really felt connected to anything, and my parents weren't from there, and like I always felt like I kind of trying to grip on to some sort of heritage or whatever thing. And I remember feeling a little bit jealous of people from the South, because you'd be like, I'm a Southern girl, I have Southern heritage, and my food is Southern, and my, you know, my Southern I mean, the Confederate thing was a side thing to some extent, but it's all connected. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like all of this like Southern pride is based in this Confederate stuff, and people don't want to lose that thing that feels connected to them, you know, because they have their stories that are unrelated to slavery that are related to that. So that song means something to you because my grandmother used to sing it to me, and this, you know, story of my great 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 uncle has been passed down, and he was a great man, and you know, like that kind of stuff. It's very hard for people to let that go and not see like, oh shit. Like,
yeah. Well, I find it fascinating that they're still doing those the Civil War reenactments.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of nuts. I'd be so curious to talk to somebody that does that often. And why are you doing that? Actually, my dad's best friend, who sadly passed away this year, he was really into going to those things. And I think that it was a community of people that like rallied around this story, you know, their heritage.
And it's a story is a good word for it, because it's a story. It's not the truth, you know?
Right.
But they love this romantic. It's like
Gone with the Wind.
I was just going to say Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind is such a problematic movie because it's not that the movie is the cause of the problem. It's that that movie is like a symptom of this romanticizing of that time period. And even like the thing with like Lady Antebellum like changing their name and stuff like that, it's like they never should have had that as a name to begin with. Dixie Chicks is a problematic name,
right?
You know, and it's like why is it just now that we're like realizing that? You know what I mean? But it's just because, again, we're so indoctrinated. I'm glad we're talking about this
plantation
stuff,
weddings.
The plantation
really
weddings
should not.
Blake Lively and Ryan.
I know.
Butch Reynolds had one on in that Charleston plantation, I think.
I know.
And they're like, "Oops, shit, sorry." But like, that's how deep this goes.
I mean, I remember as a child just obsessing over hoop skirts. We had one hoop skirt between the three of us girls in our dress up, you know, closet or whatever. And we were always fighting over it because we would go to these small towns and they would have reenactments, or they would have like, I remember going, I don't even know where it was. Maybe it was just Charleston. You know, you walk down the street and a woman is in a full hoop skirt with her parasol. Yeah. But like, if you really understand, if you're dressed like that, then you were a slave owner. For sure.
And you're romanticizing the story. All comes back to this sort of thing.
Right.
It's pretty crazy.
We've been totally lied to. This is not new information also.
No. They've known it since the Civil War was happening.
Right.
I mean, and black people have known this, and they've been telling us the whole fucking time.
Right.
And we're not fucking listening. No, we are not listening. Mm-hmm. This is not new information. And I know we feel surprised about it because we're fucking dumb. I don't know what's happening, you know. But like, it's time. It's time to get over it.
Yeah.
Burn those Confederate flags. Burn them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They equal hate. Period. Mm-hmm. They don't equal your mama's potato salad. They don't. They don't. It's just, I mean, I get it. And when you say too about like the reenacting the war thing, it really makes me think of like, let's say your dad, that was like the thing you and your dad did to bond. Your dad liked them. So let's say you'd go with your dad to these reenactments. Like, then you start to love them because of that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I get it. But that is the insidiousness of this Confederate pride. Mm-hmm. Is that like, you start to get people to tie it to other important things, and then it's so hard to let go of. Because then you're like, I want my kids. I had so much fun with my dad. It was bonding. Like, I want my kids to do this with me. So then it becomes this like, and then those people think that it's not related to slavery. Because they're like, no, it's just about me bonding with my dad. And it's like, no, this is still about slavery. This is still about like a horrendous thing people were trying to defend for money. It wasn't for honor. It wasn't for, that is nonsense. But when you tug at people, you connect things to people's hearts. It just gets really hard to dismantle that.
Also, there's been a lot of conversation of when do you teach your children about slavery?
The day they're born. I mean,
Right.
why would you wait?
Right.
Why?
I know. I think just the simple understanding that the history of the United States was built on the backs of enslaved individuals.
Yes.
That's what you think. And then you go for it, and then you talk about Native Americans.
I was just going to say.
Yeah.
It's not even just the black slavery. It's
Right.
We crushed, we extinguished a community, a thriving, not even one community, multiple communities of people so that white people could eat at McDonald's.
Mike Kaplan had a great tweet about like, I'm not going to say it correctly, but something about like, you guys, I feel like America's like cursed or something. Like, I mean, it's like we like built our nation on top of like, I don't know, like an Indian burial ground or something. No, yeah, it's totally. Like,
yeah. I mean, yeah, that's like so. And I think the more we just keep reminding, in the same way that they said, okay, we're going to put up these Confederate monuments so people don't forget about us, and then we're going to tell a story around it that's going to make them feel connected to the story. We can do the exact same thing by undoing that. You know what I mean? By taking them on. That's why we have to take the monuments down. That's why we have to undo that, and we have to start telling the real story of what was going on here, so we can really be just honest about what's really. That is how we break the curse, because we are cursed right now. We're cursed with white supremacy. And, it's breakable, but we have to start doing it. The other thing that's funny about the monuments is like, if you have a monument up and you're like, but it's history and we should just leave it. It's like, okay, well then should we, I mean, I don't think we should leave them, but at the very least we need to take the plaque off and put a new plaque up and be like, this guy was a racist. He had this many slaves. He fought for, the demise of humans, and we're putting this up to shame him. You know what I mean? That would be something at least, but that's not, of course, then people would be mad about that.
Right.
What do you want? You want it up or you want it down?
God, break the curse. That's what we got to do.
We can do it. I believe it. I believe we can. But we just have to deprogram all of us. We all have to be deprogrammed.
And again, if you're talking to somebody and I feel like a broken record sometimes when talking to people that keep saying this, and I have people in my life that have just perpetuated this problem of or this narrative of that the monuments should exist because it's history.
So put them in a basement somewhere. I don't know, and then make it be like, this is the death basement. This is the people that wanted people to die.
Put them in a museum, and then and if you want to go visit
what
them,
really happened.
Right.
We don't have to destroy the monument. That's fine. I'm okay with that too. It's like I said, it can be a monument of shame.
I love that. I really like that. But then it's just a plaque with the truth.
Yeah, just
the actual truth.
Yeah,
and
facts.
Then let's go from there.
Sure, if you want to leave them up.
Right.
So next time your friends or somebody says something like that, then you can just tell them okay, let's leave them up, and then let's just replace the plaque.
Okay.
How about that?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think that we need a reform towards monument. That's what I'm just putting it out there.
These horrors are shameful.
Yeah.
Our busts, our boobs are
our busts should be out there.
Not our heads. Just cut our heads off and just it'll be boobs.
Just the tits.
Yeah. Why not?
Oh, God. Oh, Jesus.
Well, I hope everybody learned something today. I mean, I think that also if you have questions about the Civil War and how that shit went down, there are so many sources on the internet, and just be careful which ones you're reading. If you're going to the Daughters of the Confederacy or Sons of the Confederacy, they're gonna tell you lies. But if you go to some real historians, there's a lot of and the place to start is that thing I was telling you about, that interview, Here and Now's interview with the romanticized view of Civil War means nobody's really responsible.
And another fun game that you could play if you just have nothing else to do right now is call your congressmen and women and just ask them the simple question of, do you believe that slavery was the cause of the Civil War? And just see what they say and then know how to vote accordingly.
Yeah.
It's a fun little game to do on a Friday night.
Yeah, it's really fun.
You know,
it'd like a drinking game. Every time you say it
racist,
was state rights, state rights, do a shot. You'll probably get wasted by the end of the night, unfortunately, but it's good. I'm excited. I'm excited for our country. We're gonna make some big moves. Is everybody excited? Let's get pumped. I know it's a weird time. This is the time to get pumped. We're gonna fix this shit. I'm ready to fix it. Change the plaques.
Change the plaques with just the truth.
Yeah.
And also, everybody, we should just get off Facebook. We got to delete it.
Get off
It's
Facebook.
So bad.
Fuck Facebook.
Fuck Facebook.
Fuck that shit.
Get the fuck out.
They're lying. They're lying. They're doing the wrong things. And now I'm starting to sound insane, but this is all just true. just telling the truth. If you want to fight me on it, let's gently fight. I don't want to fight, but I want to have a conversation about it. Let's converse. We'll talk about it.
If you want to, throw a penny at our boobs and our busts and make a wish, we'll
then go to Patreon
happen.
and you can do it there.
Good plug. Yes.
Yeah.
That's right, folks. We're on Patreon. You actually have to just go to patreon.com/reformedwhores to support us. That's a great way to it's like our fans only page, except no titties.
Not yet. I don't know. Just keep you hoping. Yeah, maybe one day when we're 90 at 90, we'll do it. We'll finally show them. It'll be great. We'll commemorate them and all their heroic duties that they've performed throughout the years. Just like they'll be the daughters of the Reformation, the Horus Reformation. They'll put them up 30 years after our death.
I love it. That's perfect.
Anyway.
That's great. Rest in peace, RBG. This episode was for you.
Yeah, I think she'd loved it. I don't know. She
would
probably
have
like, what
loved
is this nonsense? She would. I wouldn't want her to waste her time. She needs to have a pina colada somewhere.
Oh, I bet she is. Gosh. Anyway.
Well, thank you for listening. I hope you learned something. If you want to write in with any thoughts, please do at difficultwomenpodcast@gmail.com. I didn't remember our email for 1 second. I have all these other things I want to say about Democrats and Republicans and those party switching, but I'm going to save that for another episode.
Wait, what?
You know how like people always say like, oh, well, like it was the Republicans that freed the slaves,
right?
We'll talk about that's our cliffhanger for another episode.
Well, I think I've said this before, but I'm actually related to Ulysses S. Grant.
I think I am too.
See?
Yeah.
He also owned slaves, so
I mean,
there you
it's
go.
not that great.
It's
not
so great.
Yeah.
Anyway,
cool. All right, bye on that note. We love you.
There's a little procedure that could change the world. It can make you a hero. Do a solid favor for your girl and get unwanted pregnancies down to 0. It's got no side effects that are adverse. And don't you know it can even be reversed? Oh, it might increase your pleasure. Look, we're all in this together. It's an option worth talking about. Do it for all of us. It's not dangerous. Vasectomy, vasectomy, vasectomy. Yeah, there's birth control pills and IUDs, but those can make us sick and give us injuries. Ladies can't make babies for a limited time, but you can shoot those babies out until you die. If you're being careless, you can spread your seed. It's time you took more responsibility. Oh, we're not being dramatic. Birth control's been problematic. Oh, we really should be talking about this. Do it for all of us. Time to get generous. Vasectomy, vasectomy, vasectomy. Hey, fellas. I know you're probably feeling a little bit uncomfortable right now.
Well, as they should be. We are talking about a little knife near their goodie bags.
Oh, but you don't need to worry, 'cause we're gonna walk you through this very simple procedure, step by step. So hang on. So you don't like getting your junk examined? We can relate. But all you gotta do is take that cup and masturbate. Take your time and enjoy. Then we'll freeze all those future girls and boys. They put a doodle in your noodle, slip and twist inside your dong. With some Dr. Magic happens and we can get it on. We can get it on. Do it for all of us. We're being serious. Vasectomy you, vasectomy, vasectomy. You can change the world. You can change the world. No more unwanted pregnancies. Think about a vasectomy. Don't want more children. Oh, you never wanted children. Just tie up those tubes for me and you. Do it for the kids. Do it for the ladies. Vasectomy you, vasectomy.